All right, I'm back real quick. Something else that I just noticed that could potentially trip you up if you don't pay attention. The end blocks, the blocks that have the blind holes in them here, those are larger than the center support block that you end up cutting in half. And that block has the holes that go all the way through it. That block is physically smaller in length than these two side blocks here. The other thing that you want to, the reason I bring that up is because when you go to drill these holes that mount the blocks to the aluminum, since this piece is bigger, you'll note that the distance from the edge is 3/8. On this piece, it's a smaller piece. The distance from the edge is 1/4. So when you drill these blocks, make sure you drill these two end blocks the same, and drill this one with the 1/4 inch distance from the end. Don't be sure you don't drill all three of them exactly the same. All right? All right. Talk to you soon. All right, everyone, I am back and fitting these blocks to the piece of angle that they're ultimately going to mount to. So, like I had just talked about, I've got the blocks oriented correctly on the tubes. I've got the rudder pedals oriented correctly as if the fuselage was upside down, which it is. So this is how the rudder pedals would be oriented inside of the airplane. So this way is forward, this way is aft. The fuselage is upside down, so here are the rudder pedals. And again, the instructions tell you to have the right rudder pedal, I believe it is, in front of the left rudder pedal. So this is the right rudder pedal. This is the tube that it's connected to, and this tube is forward of this tube, which is the left rudder pedal. Now again, remember, everything is upside down. So I started with this side here. I made sure I had the block on here correctly with the angle that's already cut into it, as I talked about earlier. And I labeled that so that I knew which side was forward and which side was the top and which side was the bottom. Then I brought the block over to my aluminum and I have the aluminum oriented with the rudder pedals. So this is the right side aluminum that would be mounted this way. And over there is the left side aluminum. So this would, with the fuselage upside down, this is how everything would be oriented. But if you flip the fuselage right side up, this now goes this way. So now you can see this is the right side of the fuselage in its correct upright orientation. I have my line here that I had marked when this was still in the fuselage. I basically just took a a thin plastic ruler, this one right here, with this clecoed in the fuselage, this piece here. I just slid the ruler all the way forward till it stopped, and then from there I marked back 3 inches, which is what this line here represents. I did the same thing on that aluminum over there, and then once I took the 2 aluminum pieces off, I put them together back to back, and both of these lines matched up perfectly. So now this is my minimum line. So I had taken the block for this side, and I lined up this edge with the line, and then I held the block parallel to the aluminum channel, centered best I could, and then I just dropped a number 12 drill bit through each hole to make my mark. And then I took the block off and I drilled the aluminum. Now these blocks, they get drilled with a number 10 drill because they're soft and there's a lot of give to them. A number 10 drill bit works really well for the bolts to slide through. But when you drill your aluminum, make sure you drill it no bigger than a number 12 drill bit. Number 12 is what we normally use to drill for the AN3 bolts through a hard material like aluminum. This softer material requires a slightly bigger drill bit. So number 10 for the blocks, number 12 for the aluminum. Don't accidentally use a number 10 on the aluminum. Your hole will be too big. So once I had the block set at this initial reference line and I drilled the 2 holes, I basically just came back from that hole, or from this reference line. I backed the block up 1 inch, made another line, and then again put the block on the line, held it in place, held it in alignment with the aluminum, and then dropped the drill bit down through here to make my mark. Took the part over to the drill press, drilled it. Now I'm back and I'm getting ready to do my 3rd mark. And I'll show you that here. So here's my 3rd line. So again, this is my reference line from the beginning. I measured back 1 inch, lined the block up with this line, marked the holes, drilled them. Now here's my 3rd line, 1 inch from here. I'm going to put my block on this line, drop the drill bit down, make my mark for the 2 holes, and then drill them. The instructions tell you to maintain a 2D distance from edge to edge, not center to center. And you can see here I've got plenty more than that. So if you can imagine, when the block is in place, you're basically moving the block back 3 inches, 1 inch at a time. So I'm going to have 3 inches of adjustment. It'd help if I get it in camera. I will have 3 inches of adjustment on the block, fore and aft. You want to make sure that you use the right side block on the right side aluminum and the left side block on the left side aluminum. Because unless you're drilling these on a CNC machine, if you're drilling them by hand on a drill press, these holes between this block and the other block are not going to be exactly the same. And if you get the blocks interchanged, that angle that's built into them will be incorrect. And if you try to fit the left side block on the right side aluminum, the holes may not line up. So make sure you keep the designated right side with the right side aluminum and the designated left side block with the designated left side aluminum. And you keep them oriented. Make sure you mark them so you keep, you know which side is the top, which side is the bottom, which end is forward, and which end is aft. I believe that's it. All right, I'm going to finish drilling this piece, and I'm going to start drilling the other piece. And like I said, since my original reference line, when I brought the 2 pieces of aluminum together to check the reference lines, they matched up perfectly. So I know if I do that aluminum, if I do that piece of aluminum there with that block, and I start with that reference line, and I do that one the same way every inch, that black block will line up with this black block across the width of the fuselage. You want to make sure that you don't get them staggered, because then your rudder pedals will be at an angle, or they won't go into the blocks at all. All right, again, hope that all kind of makes sense. Let me get back to it. All right, so I am fitting the rudder pedals and brakes now to the actual fuselage. I've got all the support structure back in, and you can see I've got the rudder pedals themselves in. I've got the black blocks on the ends of the tubes. Those are also in place. And I did not have to trim anything. The blocks with the tubes went in very nicely. I was a little concerned that maybe the tubes would be a little too long and the blocks would not fit correctly, or maybe the tubes would push on the blocks enough that it would buckle, or not buckle, but bow the skin a little bit from the outside. that is not the case. Let me crawl up underneath here. All right. So here's one block, and I've got the correct length bolts, but I have the just regular standard nuts just to hold it in place. So there's one block in place. Here's the other block. I'll talk about those washers here in a second. This note here for washers. Again, this is the piece that I had taken out, and I had matched this with this on the workbench and drilled the holes in this. So it was just a matter of coming back and reinstalling this and some of the other support structure, putting the blocks, making sure that they're oriented correctly, that the correct block is on the correct side of the airplane and it's oriented correctly. Because like I said, these holes down inside of the block for the tubes, those are cut at an angle. So you've got to get the block positioned correctly in relation to the taper of the fuselage. Once that's done, you just hold it up in place, and then your bolts can run right up in there. And like I said, just temporary nuts to hold it. So the washers, what I've noticed, my tubes were not too long, but you can see there's a decent amount of play, which I don't like. So I'm either going to add some kind of a shim material inside the block on the end, on both sides of the tube here and over there, or I may just shim it on one side, so the pedals will be moved over more toward the center of the airplane, which might be a little bit more comfortable. I don't know. It seems like this pedal is up against the fuselage side a little tight. I mean, that's how it's designed, obviously. But I'm thinking if I could hooch it over more toward the center of the airplane, even if it's just, 1/8 of an inch or so, it might be a little bit more comfortable for my foot. Don't know. The other thing too is I was thinking if I'm going to shim it anyway, maybe I should shim both ends. That way this is riding and the end of the tube is riding on that, and it's not that it would, but at least it wouldn't be grinding on this softer material. It would be pressing up against either steel, probably a stainless steel shim of some sort, or a stainless steel washer. I'm not there yet. It's just some thoughts, but I'm going to do something to get rid of that play. Now I did try to squeeze the rudder pedals together like that and move them to make sure that the master cylinders didn't bump up against each other, and they don't. So there they are, as far apart as they can go, and then there they are, as close as they're going to get, and you can see there's no interference. But I don't like that amount of play, so I'm definitely going to do something about it. I'm just not there yet. This position of the blocks is all the way aft, so this would be for short-legged people. And then I've got positions where I can move it up forward. I had it all the way forward initially, and when I had it, the rudder pedals all the way forward, I started fitting this center support bracket here. Now you have to cut a notch out of it here to clear this recess that mounts in this opening, and it sticks out this way, and you have to cut this notch. You have to cut this notch out to clear that recess. And then at this point it was just a matter of making sure that my blocks were bolted to the fuselage. And then I brought, after making the center block, I brought it over. Where's the other part? Where's the other side of it? Stand by. I'm sorry, now you're staring at the floor. I don't know where the other half went. But I just brought the block over, clamped it to this way, and then I had this pushed back to where I was comfortable with the edge distance on this piece of aluminum. And then I just marked I had already drilled this piece. So it's just a matter of bringing it over, clamping it here with the block, and then moving it fore and aft so I got good edge distance on the piece of aluminum. And then I clamped it to the aluminum, and then using my drill bit, I marked these hole locations. Then I took this out of the way, and using a 90-degree drill, I drilled these holes. So now I've got this clamped back in place, and after I had this clamped back in place after drilling it, then I moved my blocks all the way to the other extreme. I had them all the way forward. Now I've got them all the way back, and you can see that it fits on here really nice. So no matter where this block is, this piece is in the right location. It doesn't have any movement to it. Okay, so now at this point, all I have to do is get this block centered, get this centered on here, and then I can match drill down through the block into this piece. And what I'll do is I'll come down and I'll match drill it in this location. Then I'll take these blocks and I'll move them to the next location, which will move the tubes down. I'll put the block back on, mark those locations, move the blocks, the end blocks, all the way to the last position, which again will move the tubes this way, and then move the block and mark those hole locations, and then I can drill all of these at once. But before I do that, since this is my most forward position or my most rearward position, because obviously this is the front of the airplane, this is as far back as they're going to go. So this is as long as this bracket needs to be. When you look at the instructions, you can cut this bracket. So now that I have this set up furthest away from the firewall, I can go ahead and mark the bracket and cut this end off. And then I can go back and put my lightning holes in it. So I'm going to do that next. I'm going to mark this. I'm going to mark this. I'm going to cut the end off, and I'm going to lay out my lightning holes, put those in. Then I'll bring it back, clamp it, cleco it in place, figure out where I want my block, and then start marking these holes. And then once I get those marked and drilled, I'm done. I can move on to something other than rudder pedals. So that's how I had done it. And again, I apologize for the shoddy camera work. Again, by myself, trying to do everything one-handed. Whine, right? All right. Let me get cracking on this stuff, and I'll get back to you. All right, so here is the rudder pedals, or here are the rudder pedals installed and completed. You can see I have the middle support bracket there in place, and I put my lightning holes in it. I cut the tip of it back because with this block, with the end blocks down there all the way aft, I had everything laid out, and I put the blocks on the bars in the center here, and wherever they ended up on this angle is where I had marked the holes. And then after I had the holes marked, I came back and I cut this end off. This end stuck out further, and I cut it off, making sure my edge distance was good here. So then I would move the tubes to each position on each end, and then I'd put the block on top of or around the tubes here in the middle, over top of this center support bracket. And then I would just come down through the top with the drill bit and make my marks on the bracket. And I did that for each position. And then, of course, drilled the holes. So that is now done. One thing I want to point out is when you have the bracket clecoed here, when you have this center bracket clecoed and you go to make your holes through the block into the bracket, make sure that this is 90 degrees to the firewall. You can put a, you can take a cleco out and put, what do I want to call it? Put your, I'm drawing a blank. Wow. Anyway, just make sure it's 90 degrees. Dang. Make sure it's 90 degrees to the firewall before you mark your holes in through the block into the bracket, because you don't want the bracket to be off like this. Your holes here may be good, but as you run out to the end, they may walk out to one edge or the other, and you'll lose your edge distance. So that's it for this. The instructions, of course, tell you to take this out and store it, so that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the airplane, and I think the next step is to reinstall this bottom skin here, and then from up underneath I start fitting the reinforcement angles that run across this skin. I believe that's next. So pull the pedals out and I'll get cracking on that.